Africa. Many know that Uganda was recognized around the world for its early efforts to stem the spread of AIDS at a time when many other African nations were in complete denial. Some of that progress has waned over the years, but there's been a renewed effort to rebuild on earlier success. Uganda is also helping to lead negotiations with various factions involved in the violence in eastern Congo, also known as the rape capital of the world. Last year, the armed rebel group M23 overran key parts of this eastern Congo, bringing further human suffering to an already scarred part of Africa. I want to acknowledge the constructive role that Uganda has played in moving these talks forward. Uganda is also home, originally, to the horrific actions of the Lord's Resistance Army, an army group led by a messianic and violent warlord named Joseph Kony. Kony and the LRA's brutality were once again in the spotlight last year when the group Invisible Children launched an online video detailing more than 20 years of brutal LRA violence, including murder, rape, kidnapping, and the dragooning of child soldiers. To date, this video has had almost 100 million viewers. In Uganda, I had the chance to meet with two impressive people who were victims of the Lord's Resistance Army. They witnessed some horrific acts. One young man met with us at the ambassador's residence. This Lord's Resistance Army invaded his village, dragged all the young men out, put them in a circle, and said, "You're about to become soldiers in the army. Before you become soldiers, though, you'll be asked to kill your family." Many of them couldn't believe it. This young man said he was praying they'd spare his father. They brought his father in front of him and murdered him as the child looked on. Then he was brought into service for 6 months, roaming through the jungles, fighting on behalf of this Lord's Resistance Army until there was an opportunity for him to escape. He's turned his life around. It's hard to imagine anyone could after those horrible experiences, but he has. Next to him was Lily, a beautiful young woman. She, too, was kidnapped by the Lord's Resistance Army and forced into unspeakable things for the time that she was under their control until she, too, escaped. The good news in both of those stories is they've made a life since then, and they've tried to help others who have been victimized by this kind of kidnapping. These horrible things are occurring in Africa, and we have decided to help. With the Ugandans, we are working to put Joseph Kony and the Lord's Resistance Army out of business. We have pushed them out of Uganda. We now believe that they're in the Central African Republic. In 2010, Congress passed a bill led by a former colleague and a great champion of Africa and a former friend and colleague of the presiding officer, Senator Russ Feingold of Wisconsin, called the Lord's Resistance Army Disarmament and Northern Uganda Recovery Act of 2009 an important step forward, and it was. I was proud to co-sponsor the bill. As a result, last year, President Obama, because of the Feingold legislation, sent 100 U.S. military personnel to help the Ugandan army track down and bring an end to the Lord's Resistance Army menace. I met in the bush with our military in Uganda who are following up on this Feingold legislation. I can't tell you what a remarkable job they're doing under very difficult circumstances. The LRA is on the run. Defections are increasing, and formerly terrorized communities are starting to live without fear. There's still more to be done, but I was impressed and proud of how the United States stepped up and is doing something that will be remembered for generations by the Ugandan people. Let me also take a moment to mention another issue in Uganda. There is a proposed law pending before the parliament in Uganda that would literally criminalize homosexuality, in some cases even imposing the death penalty. This is a cruel piece of legislation that has been met by global condemnation and concern. I met with the activists in Uganda who fear for their personal safety if this bill becomes law, a fear that I believe, unfortunately, is very warranted. I and others have appealed to the Ugandan government not to tarnish its international reputation and impose criminal penalties against people simply because of their sexual orientation. Uganda must continue to be a leader in the region, something this legislation will substantially erode. I hope that ultimately common sense will prevail.